In the winter of 1994, a machinist named Ray Odom was tinkering in his pole barn outside Kalispell, Montana, wiring a beat-up electrolysis cell to a single solar panel he'd bought at a swap meet for 20 bucks. He ran a rubber hose from that cell into an old 20-pound propane tank sitting on a milk crate. For the next 4 winters, that tank kept his chest freezer running through every blackout the valley threw at him. And he never paid the power company a dime for it. His neighbors figured he'd lost it. His son figured he was onto something nobody else had bothered to notice. When a county extension agent finally looked at the setup in 1999, she measured just under 5 kilowatt hours sitting in that tank fully charged through 2 hard freezes and a downed line. No lithium, no cobalt, no subscription, no installer. Just a tank, a jug of water, and a piece of chemistry so basic that the modern battery industry has spent the last 2 decades acting like it was never invented. Because if you understood what Ray Odom understood in that pole barn, you would never hand a battery company $10,000 again. And that's exactly what a quiet network of off-grid tinkerers in Idaho, in Montana, in the hollows of Appalachia have been doing for years without ever putting it on the news. They call it the solar hydrogen tank. Build one behind your own house this weekend, and you'll have a self-refilling backup battery that costs nothing to run, nothing to service, and nothing to replace for the next 30 years. Total cost, about $150 in parts from a welding supply shop and a hardware store. Compare that to the $10,000 to $16,000 your solar installer wants for a Tesla Powerwall, a battery that starts losing 2 to 3% of its capacity the moment you switch it on, guaranteeing you'll be buying a replacement in about a decade. That's not a design flaw, that's the business model. The home battery industry pulled in over $20 billion last year, and it has every reason in the world to make sure you never hear what I'm about to tell you. Here's the chemistry, and it really is this simple. Water is 2 hydrogen atoms stuck to 1 oxygen atom. Run electricity through it, and that bond snaps. Hydrogen goes one way, oxygen goes the other. Your solar panel makes the electricity. The electricity splits the water. The hydrogen gets caught in a tank. Later, when you need power, you push that hydrogen through a fuel cell and run the whole reaction backward. Hydrogen meets oxygen, electrons flow, and you've got electricity again. You could draw the whole loop on a napkin. Splitting the molecule takes a little over 1.5 volts in the real world, and a single mid-sized solar panel on a sunny afternoon throws off more than enough current to turn roughly 1.5 gallons of water into stored hydrogen every day. Nothing exotic, just electricity running through water in a controlled cell. Now here's the number that should stop you. Hydrogen holds about 33 kilowatt hours of energy per kilogram. A lithium cell holds a fraction of a kilowatt hour per kilogram. Hydrogen carries something like 150 times more energy per pound than the battery bolted to your garage wall. A standard propane tank, rated for far more pressure than you'll ever put in it, holds enough hydrogen at 200 pounds per square inch to store somewhere around 5.5 kilowatt hours. A Powerwall holds 13.5. So 1 tank gets you most of the way to half a Powerwall. 2 tanks pass it, and you've spent less on both than most families spend eating out on a Friday night. I'm not going to hide the catch from you because the catch is real. Turning that hydrogen back into electricity through a fuel cell only runs around 50% efficient. Round trip, solar to hydrogen to electricity again, you're looking at 30 to 35% efficiency. A lithium battery does 90. That's a real gap, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. But here's what that number leaves out. The electricity going into this system is surplus solar your panels were already making and already throwing away. Your panels overproduce most sunny afternoons. That power is worth exactly nothing to you the second it hits the ground. Capturing 1/3 of nothing isn't a loss, it's found money, and the fuel going in is water from your tap. Not cobalt dug out of a mine, not lithium, brine pumped out of a salt flat in another hemisphere. This isn't some fringe idea I made up in a garage. It's 180 years old, and it once carried men to the moon. In 1839, a Welsh judge and hobbyist scientist named William Grove built the first working version of this exact reaction in a London laboratory. Hydrogen and oxygen in glass tubes wired together, producing a measurable current. He called it the gas battery, and you can still find his sketch in the scientific journals of the day. It looks like something scribbled by a bored student. 2 tubes, some wire, a trickle of electricity. The chemistry hasn't changed one bit since. A little over a century later, NASA needed a power source small enough and light enough to fit inside a Gemini capsule, and engineers built a hydrogen fuel cell that ran the astronauts' instruments and gave them clean drinking water as a side effect. Every crewed mission that followed, all the way through Apollo, ran on the same chemistry. Your own government trusted this reaction with the lives of astronauts 250,000 miles from home. But there's no building code in your county that even acknowledges you could put a scaled-down version of it in your garage for $400. And it didn't stop with the space program. A Canadian company had working kitchen cabinet-sized fuel cells for homes by the early 90s. The prototypes worked, the funding dried up. An Austrian manufacturer piloted a rooftop-to-hydrogen home storage system in over 1,000 houses in the early 2000s. And those homes ran through entire summers without pulling a single watt from the grid. The pilot ended and the product never crossed the ocean. A Berlin-based company has quietly installed hundreds of similar systems across German homes right now, systems that split water, bank hydrogen in the basement, and heat the house through winter with zero grid connection. You cannot buy that system in a single American state. The chemistry worked every time. The market simply never wanted it here. You're going to hear 3 objections the moment you mention this to anyone, and every single one collapses under its own numbers. First, someone will tell you hydrogen is dangerous. They'll bring up the Hindenburg. Here's the actual comparison. Hydrogen needs to reach around 900 degrees Fahrenheit before it self-ignites. Gasoline ignites at roughly half that. Propane, the gas already sitting in a tank on your back deck that nobody worries about, ignites at a lower temperature than hydrogen does. And hydrogen is more than 14 times lighter than air, so when it leaks, it doesn't pool on the floor like propane. It shoots straight up and disperses in seconds. Every major industrial gas supplier in the country trucks hydrogen cylinders down public highways every single day. You're not inventing a new risk. You're borrowing a storage method with a safety record measured in billions of miles. Second objection, losing over half your energy to inefficiency sounds like a terrible investment. It would be if you'd paid for that electricity. You didn't. It was free surplus, your panels made on a Tuesday afternoon when your house was already fully powered. Stretch the math over 20 years, and the real cost per stored kilowatt hour from a hydrogen system running on surplus solar lands around 4 cents. A lithium wall battery, once you factor in the price, the degradation, and the fact that you'll replace it at least once in that window, lands closer to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Efficiency isn't the same thing as economy. Third objection, this sounds too specialized for a regular person to build. It's the weakest objection of the 3. A surplus electrolysis cell runs $40 to $90 online. A surplus fuel cell for turning hydrogen back into power runs $200 to $400. Your storage tank is a $30 rated propane tank from any farm supply store. The tubing, the fittings, the wrench, this is the same hardware welders and home brewers handle every day of the week. Does this actually hold up where you live? Take Phoenix. Over 300 sunny days a year, your panels are overproducing by mid-morning, and a single panel can top off a tank in about 4 days of steady sun. Meanwhile, your neighbor's lithium battery is quietly throttling itself once his garage crosses 90 degrees in July, because lithium cells lose performance in sustained heat. Your tank doesn't notice the heat at all. Flip to somewhere like Fairbanks. You don't fill your tank in the dead of a polar winter. You fill it in June when the sun barely sets, and that stored hydrogen sits at full strength through the entire dark season, while a lithium battery below freezing can lose a third or more of its rated capacity. Or take a hurricane-prone stretch of coastline, where the grid goes down for a week and a lithium wall battery with no sun to recharge, it drains completely within a couple of days. A tank filled the week before holds every gram of hydrogen it started with, regardless of what the sky is doing. So why haven't you built one? Why has no installer ever mentioned it? Follow the money. A lithium pack is built with roughly a 10-year lifespan baked into the chemistry. That's not an accident, that's the plan. In year 10, you buy another one. The installer bills labor again. The financing company writes another loan with interest attached. The monitoring subscription keeps billing you $15 to $30 a month to watch your own battery slowly lose capacity. Now put a hydrogen tank in the middle of that same chain. It doesn't degrade. The one wear part, a membrane, costs $20 or $30 to replace every few years. There's no subscription because there's nothing to monitor, and no installer callback because nothing fails on a schedule. A system that costs $150 lasts 30 years and replaces its only wear part for the price of a pizza is a threat to every recurring revenue business built around lithium. And the codes reflect that the certification standards for home battery storage were written entirely around lithium and lead acid chemistry, because no manufacturer with a lobbying budget ever asked regulators to make room for hydrogen. The federal tax credit for home battery storage hands you 30% back if you buy a lithium wall unit. Build this yourself, and there's no category for it at all. The credit was written by the industry it benefits, and your $150 version was never in the room when they wrote it. Here's how you actually build one over a weekend. On day one, gather your parts. A PEM electrolysis cell from a surplus supplier, $40 to $90. A new 20-pound propane tank, about $30. 10 feet of rated polyethylene tubing, roughly $12. A brass check valve to stop backflow, $8. A pressure gauge rated up to 300 pounds per square inch, $15. A gallon of distilled water, a few dollars. Teflon tape, and 10 feet of solar wire with connectors. If you already own a solar panel, you're under $150 total. Lay it all out. Check every thread is clean, and that's your first evening done. The next morning, make your connections. Strip and secure your wire leads to the electrolyzer terminals. Torqued down properly, not just finger tight. Run the leads out toward your panel, but don't connect power yet. Fill the electrolyzer's reservoir to the line with distilled water. Only distilled, nothing else. More on that in a minute. Thread your tubing onto the hydrogen outlet, wrap the threads in Teflon tape, hand tighten, and give it one more turn with a wrench. Route the other end through your check valve and into the tank's service port the same way. Mount your gauge on the second port. Every fitting gets the same treatment. Tape, hand tight, one wrench turn, no shortcuts. You should be done by lunch. Spray every joint with soapy water and watch for bubbles. Any bubbles, tighten that joint and check again. That afternoon, connect your panel and go live. The cell will sit quiet, but your gauge won't. On a clear day with a decent panel, expect the needle to climb 30 to 50 pounds per square inch an hour. By evening, you should be sitting somewhere between 120 and 180 pounds per square inch. Leave the tank valve closed, note the pressure, and walk away. Your only job from here is keeping that reservoir topped with distilled water. About a liter covers 5 hours of running time. The next morning, before coffee, check the gauge again and write the number down. At 200 pounds per square inch, you're holding around 170 grams of hydrogen, enough for roughly 5.5 kilowatt hours banked on a shelf in your shed. It cost you no subscription, no technician, and no permission from anyone. It'll be sitting at that same pressure in January, just like it is today. If you've made it this far, you're not the type to build something and let a missed detail wreck it a month in. So here's what I held back on purpose. Water purity is the mistake that kills more homemade systems than anything else. Tap water, well water, even bottled spring water all carry dissolved minerals that coat your membrane within days and can ruin it within a month. Distilled water only. It costs about $1.20 a gallon and it's not optional. Inspect your tank every 6 months. It's rated well above your operating pressure, but rubber O-rings dry out and crack over time, and they cost less than $1 to replace. Keep spares taped to the shelf. If the tank's more than a decade old, get it pressure tested at any propane dealer for less than the price of a large pizza. Ventilation matters, and this is the one honest trade-off you have to accept. Hydrogen isn't toxic, but it's invisible and odorless, unlike the propane on your grill, which has a smell added specifically so you'd notice a leak. Keep your setup outdoors or in a shed with vents high and low, never in a sealed room. You need a way to turn that hydrogen back into power. A surplus fuel cell, $200 to $400, converts it to direct current you can run through a small inverter for household electricity. If all you need is a cooking flame or radiant heat during an outage, a simple hydrogen burner tip does that with no conversion losses at all and costs almost nothing. Decide which one you need before you build, not after. One tank alone will run a fridge, a freezer, and some lighting for around half a day. For real whole house backup through a multi-day outage, you want 4 tanks tied together with a brass manifold and a single regulator, under $500 total in hardware, and it matches a Powerwall's capacity without a single cell degrading. Add an inline desiccant tube between your electrolyzer and your tank. It strips out moisture and trace oxygen that would otherwise corrode a fuel cell membrane over time. It costs about $8 and it'll add years to your system's life. And be honest with yourself about the legal gray zone. No state explicitly bans storing hydrogen this way on your own property, but none explicitly permits it either. There's no code checkbox, no inspector trained for it. That's roughly where rainwater collection sat 15 years ago, before most states caught up and protected it. No insurance policy covers this system today, and no appraiser will add value for it. You either accept that uncertainty or you wait for the codes to catch up. The good news is almost everything else lasts practically forever. The tank is steel, the tubing and fittings don't degrade from hydrogen exposure, and the only true wear item, the membrane, is rated for years of daily use and costs less than a dinner out to replace with a screwdriver. While a lithium cell starts dying in the box before you even install it, your tank sits there holding every gram, decade after decade. 2 things on this list are honest costs you can't engineer your way out of. The round-trip efficiency really is low, and the legal ground really is uncertain. Everything else has a fix that costs less than filling up your truck. Hydrogen is the oldest element there is, forged within the first minutes of the universe, sitting in every star and every ocean since long before there was a name for any of it. Go stand in your garage tonight, right where a salesman would love to bolt a $10,000 lithium battery to the wall and hand you a 12-year payment plan. Now picture a wooden shelf instead, a $30 steel tank, and a gauge needle parked at 200 psi. Picture the next storm that knocks out every transformer on your street while your fridge keeps humming and your porch light is the only one still on. That's a $150 tank doing the job of a $10,000 battery for 3 times as long, without ever asking your permission or your credit score. A lot of what gets covered on this channel didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because an industry built on selling you a replacement every 10 years decided that something this simple wasn't worth their time. A tank that lasts a lifetime and a membrane that costs less than a pizza doesn't make anybody's quarterly earnings call. It just makes you independent, and independence has never had a lobbyist fighting for it. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure it keeps finding you. Tell me in the comments the longest outage you've ever lived through and how you got through it. Generator, candles, a relative's spare room. I read all of them, and if you're already storing your own power some other way, tell me that too, because it tells me exactly how badly you'll want the next video on a 200-year-old insulation trick that can cut your heating bill by more than half for about $11 a square foot.